Hello and welcome to the Layer123 Speaker Soundbite Sessions. I'm Bill Yates and today I'm very pleased to be joined by Daniel Bar-Lev, who's the VP Strategic Programs at MEF, who will be joining us in London for the World Congress in December. It's very nice to have you with us, Daniel.
Likewise, thank you very much, Bill. Good to be here.
So when you come over in December, you're going to be talking about what we call on-demand supply chain. So in advance of the session, would you be able to give a description of what we mean by that?
Yeah, so we've all got used to a sort of hyperscale customer experience where we check what we want to buy, we get a quote, we get fulfillment, and it can all be within a few minutes even. But that's very much different from what we got used to over the decades with telecom. And so telecom, we're seeing that sort of the industry is moving in that direction of being able to respond very, very quickly. But what's interesting now is that it's not just simple products that are being quoted and delivered, fulfilled quickly. On the retail side, you're getting service providers that are building more and more complex products and offering them to their customers. And those complex products are relying on a whole host of partners downstream. So essentially, you're getting the retail service providers assembling complex products very quickly and delivering them to their customers. That's one aspect of these on-demand supply chains, being able to assemble those complex products quickly. But the second aspect is you've got a lot of partners downstream who have got all sorts of components of these sorts of complex products in their inventory, which they may be using themselves or they're just sitting there idle. So being able to also offer those components out of their inventory on demand is also very attractive because they get a much better return on investment on those assets rather than letting them sit idle. So that's what we mean by on-demand supply chains, being able to assemble products quickly, but also being able to reuse inventory on a wholesale basis quickly.
Okay, so within your role at MEF, taking that into account, what would you say the importance of industry collaboration and standardization and just bringing everybody onto the same plane is when it comes to delivering this kind of on-demand supply chain that consumers are now expecting, having seen it on the retail side?
So if we think of these supply chains as really being collections of buyers and sellers, right, back-to-back buyers and sellers. So what we really want to do is we want to streamline how they do business with each other, these buyers and sellers, which are typically telecoms, but not necessarily. They can be vendors, they can be enterprises as well, but they're all participating in this supply chain. So we want to make it easier for them to participate in the supply chain. And how do we do that? Well, we need to streamline the transfer of information between them. Okay, so I ask a question, do you have this? You want to respond quickly, yes, I do, or no, I don't. How much is it going to cost, and so on. So that type of free flow of information relies on what we call automation, which is machine-to-machine transfer of information. And that relies on standardization, because if we all use a different machine-to-machine interface, well, that's going to cause friction. If we keep on doing it in a proprietary way, it doesn't really help anybody. It keeps the market fragmented. So the whole industry has been moving towards what we call standardized APIs, open APIs. And that's where MEF comes in, because essentially, as an industry consortium, as a standards organization, what we're doing is we're enabling our members to essentially agree, reach consensus on what's the best way, what's the best approach to standardizing these machine-to-machine interfaces, these APIs, so that they can get on with the real business of doing business with each other. So that's one aspect of where MEF facilitates collaboration, why that's so important, standardizing the APIs for the free information flow. The second aspect, and this is a much newer one, is the whole area of reducing the friction of doing business by synchronizing state. What do we mean by that? when we do business, we have to record internally what we did when we did it. Okay, so that at the end of the day we can say, oh, here's the invoice, I delivered this to you, and I met all the conditions that we have in the agreement between us, you now owe me such and such. So every day, when we do business, we're recording internally, whether we're a business or an individual, yes, this is what happened, and this is what I got, and this is what I gave. And obviously that's what happens in the telecom industry as well. But huge systems, complex systems have developed over the years where telecoms are essentially recording the different parts of the life cycle internally. The issue is that they're interpreting the agreement with their partners in their own way. Their IT departments have essentially captured that, and at the end of a period of time, it might be a month or it might be less, it might be longer, but essentially the invoice comes, and that's the first time that really they're what we call synchronizing between them to say, yes, we agree that this is what happened, or no, we don't agree. Until then, there's no visibility. And so you get all of the issue of dispute, reconciliation, dispute resolution, and so on, which adds a lot of friction into the whole process. So what we're working on in MEF with our members is using blockchain to essentially solve that problem. And what does that mean? Blockchain, you can think of it as think of it like a shared system, a shared computer that is completely trusted by buyer and seller. So not only are they recording information internally, but they're recording it in a shared environment that they both trust and they know cannot be manipulated. It can't be changed afterwards, and they can't repudiate it. And this is what happens in cryptocurrency, right? So when we decide we're going to transfer Bitcoin or some crypto or whatever, it is logged somewhere in the blockchain, and everyone believes and trusts that it can't be manipulated afterwards. Until now, we've been relying on banks to do that for us, solely banks. Now it's blockchain. We're not involved in crypto, but the same principles apply. When I place an order, if we record it in that shared system that both buyer and seller trust, and we know it can't be manipulated and changed afterwards, then as soon as that order doesn't align with the agreement that we have between us, we stop and we get notified and we solve the problem there and then. But we don't wait until a month down the road or 6 months down the road before we discover the problem, when we have to spend all that effort trying to reconcile and resolve disputes. And the same aspect with all of the life cycle of the buying and selling. So participation in these supply chains, we want to get rid of not only the friction of passing information machine to machine, we want to also reduce that friction that business friction that arises from us having two separate systems that aren't visible to each other. We want to be able to use shared systems that we trust, that are visible to one another. And that's what we'll be talking about at the conference in December.
So that's a lot to achieve in order to do that. What do you think are the main barriers that are stopped, without wanting to give too much away in advance of your session, of course? What do you think are the main barriers that are stopping or at least hindering or slowing down the development of these on-demand supply chains?
Well, I think if we break it down into three phases, Bill, the first phase was the technology. The technology wasn't available until fairly recently. When I say fairly recently, I mean in the last, until 3, 4, 5 years ago. I won't go into what the technology is. It's sort of less relevant here. But because that technology wasn't available, it wasn't an option. Now that the technology is available, the second aspect is trusting that technology. And over the last few years, we've heard a lot about crypto and blockchain, and is it, just a passing fad, and can it really be trusted, and so on. But more and more businesses have been taking tentative steps in the direction of using shared systems based on blockchain and trusting them. And they're seeing that actually it is reducing friction, not just in the space that I've described, but in many other spaces. So I think that trust element and that awareness, we're getting to the point where more and more of the industry actually is, I wouldn't say comfortable with it, but they are willing to take a leap of faith to try it, experiment with it, and actually do stuff. I think we're now entering the third phase where, and this is I think the major barrier, is that you have systems already in place that have been working for decades. And you have workflows and people and teams and companies that are built around those workflows and systems that have been working for decades. So now the major challenge that we see in MEF is education, but also helping our members understand where can they introduce this new approach without having to sort of forklift and rip out what they've already got, and also generate new revenue. Because nobody wants to try and experiment with stuff, mess around with, existing systems that work, and then it doesn't generate revenue. So that's where we are at the moment. How do you work together with what you've already got working? Don't mess with that, but introduce new approaches that can generate revenue for you. And that's really where the focus of MEF is, of course, for telecom use cases.
That's fascinating to hear. So finally, when you're coming to London in December to discuss this with the community, aside from what you're going to be talking about, what other aspects, points of discussion, technologies, applications across the market are you looking forward to hearing more about?
Well, we're looking for those use cases where these type of approaches with APIs, which we've standardized in MEF, what we call LSO APIs, and the use of blockchain, we're also using the prefix there, LSO, Lifecycle Service Orchestration. That's our standards framework. So LSO APIs and LSO blockchain. What we're looking for are those use cases that we can address immediately with the consensus building work that we're doing in MEF, the standardization work that we're doing in MEF. It may be in the area of synchronized inventory, being able to have visibility into inventory that is resulting from products that have been ordered. It could be around billing and settlement. It could be around cybersecurity. One of the areas that's really becoming very hot at the moment, obviously, is protecting, especially in cloud environments, from cyber attacks, the whole area of cybersecurity. That relies on identity. And there's a whole new area of self-sovereign identity that's coming in that's very much tied into this blockchain story. So we're looking for those use cases. I'll be listening to hear what's said in the conference by other people and see if we can contribute to that. And obviously networking with people and chatting with them offline.
Yeah, it's definitely good to get back to that. Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing your thoughts in advance of the Congress, and thank you for joining us. And we will see you in London in December.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Bill, and I'm also looking forward to seeing you all in December. Thank you.